"You've reached your limit. We're elevating our standards." That's what he stated, casually sliding the termination papers across the desk as if they were a dinner menu. My name is Emma Sinclair. I'm 38 years old, and until last Friday, I was the senior business strategist at Redwood Dynamics, a thriving tech consultancy based in Austin, Texas. I had dedicated nearly 11 years there. No extended breaks, no lavish vacations, just consistent, solid performance. My contributions were the kind that define careers, the sort of loyalty companies often claim to value. I personally generated 60% of Redwood's revenue last year. That's not an overstatement. It's a figure from our own internal quarterly reports. My clients weren't fleeting startups or one-off transactions. They were enduring partnerships I had nurtured over close to a decade. Major players like Ventura Holdings, and Parallax Biotech. Clients who didn't just trust Redwood. They trusted me. But none of that seemed to matter on Friday. "You're stagnant, Emma," Nathan, my boss of 3 years, remarked, adjusting his cufflinks. "The industry is evolving, and we require individuals who can envision beyond the current paradigm. Innovation is crucial now." I watched his lips move, but all I perceived was white noise, like someone reciting lines from a script they hadn't written. What Nathan failed to articulate, but I already understood, was that he, too, had reached his own plateau, and someone had convinced him that the only way to advance was by stepping over people like me. 3 months prior, they had brought in Jordan Chase, a recent MBA graduate from Stanford, to shadow me. There was no explanation, just a terse email from Nathan. "Let's get Jordan up to speed. He'll be an excellent addition to your team." Shadowing, a polite euphemism for extraction. Jordan was pleasant, inquisitive, sharp in a theoretical sense. Yet he lacked intuition, no client recall. He didn't know the CEOs with whom I had forged trust over awkward dinners and early morning flights. He was unaware that Ventura's CFO, Lydia, only signed contracts after I personally guided her through risk forecasts over coffee at 6 a.m. for an entire week. He didn't grasp the human element of those deals, the crucial connection. But Nathan considered Jordan the future, young, ambitious, inexpensive, and I, in their perception, was outdated software. As he handed me the documents, Nathan offered that insincere, corporate smile that managers adopt when trying to appear benevolent. "We will, of course, honor your severance and accumulated PTO, and if you'd like a reference..." I raised my hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "It's fine," I said. "I won't require a reference." I packed my belongings in silence. My framed photograph of Olivia's dance recital, the Data Whisperer mug from the Christmas party I skipped last year to finalize the Calor renewal, a hefty binder of notes, my personal notebook, my true asset, the one they hadn't seen. As I departed, the receptionist looked up, puzzled. "Taking a break?" I smiled. "Something like that." I didn't shed tears on the drive home. I didn't listen to music or make any calls. I simply drove in silence, my hands steady on the wheel, contemplating not what I had lost, but what they had just set in motion. They believed they were shedding excess, but they had just severed an artery. At home, I placed the box on the dining table and stared at it. 11 years confined to 1 square foot of cardboard. Then I poured a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and reviewed my personal records. Contacts, contracts, expiry dates, renewal cycles, things I meticulously maintained. Not because I distrusted Redwood, but because I knew, someday, they would stop trusting me. My phone vibrated. A message from Lydia at Ventura. "Looking forward to our Q4 planning call. Still good for Tuesday?" I gazed at it for a long moment. She didn't know yet. None of them did. But they would. And that's when it struck me. Not sorrow, not even anger, just profound clarity. This wasn't a setback. This was my starting point. Nathan thought he was ending something on Friday. But all he did was ignite Monday. I didn't reply to Lydia's message that night, nor to the 3 other unread emails in my inbox, one from Parallax confirming next week's executive retreat, another from ClexCore inquiring about updated pricing models, and one from Nathan, subject line, "Let's make this a smooth transition." Smooth! The word lodged in my throat like a pebble. I spent the weekend in quiet contemplation, not brooding, not panicking, just processing. The house was hushed. Olivia was at her dad's place, and I didn't turn on the TV. No ambient noise, just me. The soft glow of my laptop and 11 years of history before me. Notes, client rosters, renewal calendars, a comprehensive list of every contract I'd helped secure. The figures were undeniable. I wasn't merely a top performer, I was the very spine. What they had terminated wasn't an employee. It was the connective tissue between Redwood and its clientele. But I didn't storm into Nathan's office or compose a scathing LinkedIn post. That's not my way. No, my form of retribution doesn't require a public platform. It simply demands precision and discretion. By Sunday evening, I had meticulously crafted a private spreadsheet. Phase 1. Awareness. No threats, no theatrics, just a simple truth communicated to the right individuals. I commenced Monday with a single phone call. Lydia Caldwell, Ventura's CFO. "Emma," she answered cheerfully. "Are you ready for Tuesday? I've already outlined the agenda." "I won't be attending," I stated calmly. "I'm no longer with Redwood." There was a pause, long enough to indicate she had been blindsided. "What? Since when?" "Friday. They let me go. Said I'd hit my ceiling." Lydia sharply exhaled. "Are you serious? You built this account." I offered no reply. I didn't need to. Then came the barrage of questions. Who will be taking over? What about our analytics integration, the Q4 budget review? "I'm not sure," I responded. They didn't provide a handover plan. "Wow." She was silent, then added, "Well, when you land somewhere, let me know." That was it. No sales pitch, no plea, just a straightforward truth delivered directly. I made 4 more calls that day, each to a senior decision maker with whom I had collaborated for years. Each conversation was almost identical. I'm no longer with Redwood. No, I wasn't planning on leaving. They decided to make a change. I just wanted you to hear it from me, not through a generic email. By 2 p.m., my phone was buzzing incessantly. And by 4 p.m., Nathan emailed again. "Hi, Emma, just a heads up. Some of your former accounts have reached out with questions. Can we coordinate a time to discuss transition strategy? We'd like to keep everything moving forward smoothly." That word, again. Smooth. I ignored it. Instead, I opened a new tab and retrieved the contact information for Elliot Carmichael, managing partner at Strategim Group, a consultancy I had spoken to 3 years ago at an industry summit. They had attempted to recruit me then. I had declined, but he had given me his direct number and said, "If you ever want to build something real, give me a call." So, I did. "Emma Sinclair," Elliot answered immediately, as if he had been expecting my call. "Still looking for someone to build something real?" I inquired. He chuckled. "Always." We met for lunch the next day at a discreet bistro in downtown Austin. No contracts, no commitments, just a conversation. I laid it out plainly. 60% of Redwood's active revenue was tied to my relationships. 8 major clients whose renewals were due within the next 60 days. A potential revenue swing exceeding $12 million. Elliot didn't flinch. "What do you require?" he asked. "Autonomy," I said. "Respect and a voice at the table." "Done," he replied without hesitation. By Thursday, I had a signed agreement, Director of Strategic Accounts at Strategim, with a signing bonus, performance-based equity, and most importantly, the freedom to connect. I didn't resort to scorched earth tactics. That's not my nature. Instead, I only contacted clients with whom I had personal, long-standing relationships, the kind built not just on paper, but on years of genuine collaboration. By Friday afternoon, 3 of them had already scheduled off-the-record meetings with me to discuss future alignment. No shouting, no theatrics, just the quiet, subtle click of shifting loyalties. And back at Redwood, I knew precisely what was unfolding. The eerie calm after a storm, when leadership begins to realize the figures aren't adding up. Monday was approaching, but this time It wasn't their Monday. It was mine, and it was going to be impactful. Monday dawned with overcast skies and that peculiar quiet that makes the air feel heavy. I didn't set an alarm. I didn't bother with a blazer or heels. I sat at my kitchen table in leggings and a soft sweatshirt, sipping coffee from my Revenue Queen mug, one of those office gag gifts that felt a little too close to reality. The irony wasn't lost on me. At 8:12 a.m., I received a call from Jared Monroe, Director of Finance at Call. "Emma, we've got a bit of an issue," he began, skipping the usual pleasantries. "Our renewal documents arrived over the weekend, but they were from someone named Jordan Chase. He didn't introduce himself, just sent a templated form with your old email crossed out." I remained silent, allowing the awkwardness to linger. "I take it you're not there anymore?" "No," I simply stated. "They decided to raise the bar. I wasn't invited." A pause, then a sigh. "We don't conduct business with strangers. And we certainly don't sign multi-million-dollar contracts with fresh graduates who email like they're applying for an internship." I offered no suggestions, made no pitch, but he knew, and I knew. Where trust goes, revenue follows. By noon, I had heard from 2 more clients, not loud protests or dramatic departures, just subtle expressions of concern. "We were under the impression you'd still be managing our portfolio. Would you be open to a conversation? Off the record?" Meanwhile, I pictured Redwood's offices, 2 miles away. Jordan fumbling to answer questions he didn't comprehend. Nathan scrutinizing spreadsheets that no longer made sense. The churn rate beginning to climb. A quiet tension during morning coffee. Then came the email. Subject: urgent strategic transition discussion from Nathan Mercer to Emma Sinclair. Time: 2:07 p.m. "Emma, we've received some client feedback regarding the transition. A few are specifically requesting you, and there's confusion about coverage. We'd like to discuss a potential consulting arrangement to facilitate the shift. We're open to terms." I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded it to Elliot, my new boss at Strategim. His reply was just 4 words. "Let them twist first." At 4:03 p.m., my phone rang again. This time it was Maya Bell, VP at Henderson Logistics, a $3.8 million account I'd secured 3 years prior. "Emma, I just hung up with Redwood," she said, her voice tight. "They said you weren't interested in continuing the relationship." I straightened up. "That's untrue. They terminated me. I didn't leave voluntarily." Silence. Then Maya whispered, "I knew something felt off. They sounded anxious, like they were trying to preempt something." "They are." Another silence, then a shift in tone. "Can you meet for lunch Wednesday?" I agreed, and she hung up with a quiet, "We should discuss figures." That night, as I gazed out the window at the city lights, I realized something had fundamentally changed. The burden of being fired, of being deemed insufficient, was gone. I was no longer angry. I was acutely aware, because somewhere in a polished boardroom, they were just beginning to grasp the magnitude of their loss. And the worst part? They had inflicted it upon themselves. On paper, it appeared to be a logical decision. Refresh the team, inject new vigor, reduce costs. But paper doesn't carry relationships. It doesn't recall the early morning calls or the all-nighters before client deadlines. And paper certainly didn't comprehend that Emma Sinclair's loyalty was never blind. It was earned. At 6:31 p.m., Elliot called. "I just got off the phone with Ventura Holdings," he said. "They asked if you were open to an exclusive arrangement if they switched vendors." "And what did you say?" I asked. "I said I'd check with my new director of strategic accounts." He replied with a chuckle. "You good with that?" I leaned back in my chair, watching the last vestiges of daylight fade over the city. "I'm very good with that." We ended the call, and I opened my calendar. 4 off-the-record meetings scheduled this week, 2 in person, 1 over dinner, and 1 at a golf club, a place I hadn't visited since I closed the deal that funded Redwood's last expansion. It was almost poetic. They feared me because I supposedly didn't meet expectations. They claimed I had stagnated. They thought I was done growing. But what they failed to understand was simple. The ceiling they perceived wasn't mine, it was theirs, and they had just constructed it directly over their own heads. By Tuesday morning, the shift was no longer theoretical. I didn't need an internal report or access to Redwood CRM to know what was transpiring. I could discern it in the hesitations during client calls, the cautious way people inquired if I was available to explore alternatives, the sudden interest in discussing alignment models. These weren't mere inquiries, they were exits in progress. At 9:47 a.m., I received a LinkedIn message from Derek Liu, a mid-level project lead at Redwood. We had collaborated for years. "Hey, Emma. Just wanted to say I'm sorry about how everything went down. Honestly, the team's been in shock. People are uneasy. Clients are calling and asking peculiar questions, ones we can't answer. It's tense here. Hope you're doing okay." I didn't reply, not because I was ungrateful, but because I knew that message would be followed by many more. Once the ripple begins, the current draws everything along with it. By lunch, I was seated across from Maya Bell at Henderson Logistics, at a corner table in a restaurant where I had once celebrated her company's 3-year renewal deal. "Emma, let me be direct," she said, placing her phone face down. "We've had 5 different people from Redwood reach out in the past week, 5 all with slightly different information. None of them were you." I nodded slowly. "I didn't leave voluntarily. They decided to go in a new direction." "Well," Maya said, leaning in, "you were the reason we stayed with Redwood. We weren't buying services. We were buying your expertise." I didn't smile, but I felt a profound sense of vindication. She continued, "So tell me, what would it take to transition everything over?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I reached into my bag and handed her a single-page summary, an outline of what service with Strategim would entail. No hard sell, just facts, figures, and what she could anticipate from working with me again. Her eyes quickly scanned it. "This offers more clarity than we've had from Redwood in a week." I sipped my water and stated, "I only move forward with clients who value consistency, transparency, and long-term partnership." She nodded. "Send me the paperwork by Friday." And just like that, 3.8 million began to drift in a new direction. I walked out of the restaurant into the bright autumn sun, my phone buzzing before I even reached the parking lot. Call. They wanted to reschedule their upcoming strategy meeting, this time at my new office, not Redwood's. Ventura Holdings confirmed their legal team had commenced reviewing options for early termination of their current contract. "We're not interested in transition calls with interns," Lydia's email read. "We'll wait for Emma." The quiet corporate machine that had dismissed me as a mere line item was starting to falter. That afternoon, Elliot stopped by my office holding a printout. "Take a look at this," he said, setting the paper on my desk. It was a screenshot from Redwood's investor update page. A statement had been posted that morning. Due to recent fluctuations in account stability, Redwood is reevaluating certain strategic partnerships and client-facing leadership roles to ensure optimal service continuity. Translation: clients were departing and they were panicking. I leaned back in my chair. "And we haven't even gone public yet." Elliot grinned. "That's what makes this so beautiful. We're not even pursuing them. They're coming to you." It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about validation. They had terminated me because they assumed they could extract the value and replace the individual. That trust, cultivated over a decade, could be transferred like a password or a shared folder. But what they never grasped was that relationships don't reside in databases. They reside in people. And if you eliminate the person, the connection perishes with them. At 6:03 p.m., I received another message, this time from Nathan. "Emma, I understand that some of our legacy clients are in contact with you. While we respect your new role, I'd ask that you consider the long-standing relationship we've had. Let's find a way to collaborate to protect everyone's interests." I stared at it for a long moment. Protect everyone's interests. That was rich, coming from the man who had ended my 11-year tenure with a recycled platitude about ceilings and raised bars. I didn't respond, because the truth was there was no everyone anymore. They had made their decision, and now the market was making its own. By the end of that week, 4 of Redwood's top 8 accounts had officially disengaged, not through scandal or public spectacle, but through formal termination notices sent to legal departments. Precise, cold, irreversible. The kind of letters that are read aloud in boardrooms by very pale executives. I hadn't sent a single one. Each decision originated from clients who had once sat across from me in hotel lounges and boardrooms. Clients who remembered that I returned calls on Sundays, stayed late to meet deadlines, and flew cross-country for a 1-hour conversation. Clients who remembered being valued, not just serviced. I didn't ask anyone to abandon Redwood. I simply provided them with the truth. And once they had it, they walked themselves to the exit. On Monday, Elliot walked into my office with a rare stillness in his expression. "Emma," he said, placing a tablet in front of me. "You need to see this." It was a link to a Redwood staff memo that had been leaked online, an anonymous source published by a local business outlet. Due to ongoing client attrition and revenue instability, Redwood Dynamics will undergo internal restructuring. Executive Vice President Nathan Mercer will step down effective immediately. In his place, a transition committee will oversee strategic continuity. I read it twice. Nathan gone. He hadn't lasted 6 weeks past my termination. I didn't smile. There was nothing to smile about, because beneath the headlines and financial ripples, there was something quieter, heavier. The stark realization that loyalty had become a liability in modern business. That showing up year after year, performing your job diligently, and building something meaningful wasn't enough to safeguard you. They had built Redwood's growth on my efforts and discarded me the moment a newer model appeared. But what they overlooked was that I wasn't just a part of the foundation. I was the architect. And when you dismiss the architect, the walls don't collapse instantly, but eventually, they do. That same day, my former assistant, Rita, messaged me from a personal number. "Hey, Emma, just letting you know they're in utter disarray over here. There was a board meeting this morning. People yelling, no clear strategy, no leadership, just utter chaos. They keep uttering your name like it's an expletive." I typed a reply, then deleted it. Some things are best left unsaid. By midweek, Strategim's internal report showed a $6.2 million surge in new business, all redirected revenue from Redwood accounts. The number wasn't merely symbolic, it was undeniable proof that the market had rendered its verdict. But that night, sitting at my dining table, wine untouched, laptop screen still glowing, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt weary, because behind every transferred account was a fragment of my life. A missed dinner, a rescheduled birthday, a night spent on conference calls while Olivia fell asleep alone in her room. I had constructed my career around being indispensable until the day they decided I wasn't. I considered calling Nathan, not to gloat, not to confront, just to inquire why. Why had he looked me in the eye and told me I'd hit a ceiling when he knew I was the ceiling? But I didn't, because I already knew the answer. He didn't truly believe in what I had built, because he hadn't built anything himself. At Strategim, we began preparing for a regional conference the following week. Elliot wanted me to speak on a panel about cultivating sustainable client relationships in volatile markets. He said I was the ideal case study. "People will listen to you," he told me, "because you're not just a theory, you're a consequence." The phrase resonated with me. A consequence. Not a disruptor, not a rebel, just a living, breathing consequence of what occurs when leadership forgets that people, not mere processes, are the true bearers of value. On Friday, my inbox pinged. Subject: meeting request personal from Everett Langston, CEO of Redwood Dynamics. "Emma," it read, "I realize a great deal has transpired in the past month. I'd like to meet off the record, no legal teams, just a conversation. I believe some apologies are long overdue. Name a time and place, and I'll be there." I stared at it for a long while. I didn't know what I would say, but I knew one thing for certain. They weren't just attempting to stop the bleeding anymore. They were trying to understand where the wound began. And deep down, they already knew. It began the moment they allowed me to walk out quietly. The meeting with Everett Langston was scheduled for Monday morning, 9 a.m., at a discreet cafe just outside downtown. The kind of quiet place where you meet someone when you prefer to keep the meeting private. He was already there when I arrived. Dark blazer, no tie, coffee cup untouched before him. He rose when I approached, extending his hand to shake mine. I allowed it. "Emma," he said, forcing a faint smile. "Thank you for coming." I sat across from him calmly without expression. "You requested a conversation, let's talk." He sighed like someone already halfway to defeat. "You were correct," he said without preamble. "About the clients, the relationships, the trust. We profoundly underestimated it all." I didn't nod. I offered no reassurance. I let the silence speak for me. "We thought, well, we believed the accounts were tied to the brand, not the person." He shook his head. "It was a miscalculation, a costly one." 11 years, I finally said. That's how long I worked to make those relationships feel effortless. How long I showed up, bore the responsibility, made the clients feel like they were part of something effective. "I know," he said softly. "Do you?" I asked. "Because if you did, Nathan wouldn't have slid termination papers across my desk and called it raising the bar." Everett swallowed. "Nathan's gone." "That's not the point," I interjected. "The point is, Redwood built a house on trust, then decided to renovate by removing the foundation." He looked up at me, no defense left in his eyes. "You built something truly remarkable. I'm sorry I failed to protect that." I leaned back in my chair, absorbing the weight of what remained unspoken. The board's panic, the intense financial pressure, the frantic scramble to mitigate a collapse that had begun the moment I departed. "Do you want something from me, Everett?" I inquired. He hesitated. "We were hoping you'd consider consulting with us, even temporarily, to help mend some of the damage, perhaps salvage what's left of the major accounts." "No," I stated, not with anger, just with finality. Because they weren't asking for me. They were asking for the version of me they discarded, the one who hadn't yet realized her true worth. He nodded, almost as if he had expected it. I figured, but I had to ask. We sat there for another moment, the clatter of coffee cups around us filling the silence. "I meant what I said," Everett added. "If you ever want to talk outside of business, you have my number." I stood and placed a few dollars on the table for the coffee I hadn't ordered. "I don't need to talk, Everett. I needed to be heard, and it's too late for that now." And with that, I left. Not triumphant, not vengeful, just complete. Because walking away with your head held high isn't about proving someone else wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you didn't require their validation to be right. Back at Strategim, things were progressing rapidly. We had secured 6 new long-term accounts since my arrival. Our division had exceeded Q3 projections by 41%. Elliot had made it official. I would be leading our new national strategy team, with equity built in from the ground up. Ownership, a voice, respect. Not mere perks, not just bonuses. Just the foundation of a place that viewed people as assets, not simply tools. On Thursday, we held a team lunch to celebrate our new hires. 3 promising strategists, all women, all sharp, all driven. I watched them laugh over tacos and exchange stories from previous roles where their ideas were dismissed, their loyalty taken for granted. I pulled one of them aside, Amira, a quick-witted analyst with foresight. "Just one piece of advice," I told her. "Never let them convince you that their ceiling is your measure of success. The moment they say you've reached your limit, remember it's probably just theirs you've surpassed." She smiled, noted. Later that night, I sat on my balcony, wine glass in hand, watching the city skyline shimmer. I thought about Redwood, about Everett, about Nathan, and that quiet Friday morning when everything had irrevocably changed. And I realized something profound. They didn't fire me because I failed. They fired me because I succeeded too quietly, because I didn't plead for validation. I earned it, and that terrified them more than anything else. Olivia came out with a blanket and sat beside me. "You're smiling," she said, like truly smiling. "I am," I replied. "Are you okay?" "I'm more than okay," I told her. "I've finally built something no one can take from me." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat like that until the sky transitioned from deep blue to black. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel compelled to prove anything to anyone. Because success isn't defined by the meetings you attend. It's not about the title or the office view. It's the inherent power to walk away and know that what you carry within you is still enough to construct an empire.